Hello. Welcome, everyone. You are in the session titled Energy Efficiency for All. It's the Energy and Housing Justice Tract. Members of the Energy Efficiency for All Coalition will highlight effective advocacy accomplished through building collective power to ensure all renters can live in homes that are affordable and healthy. Our panel and the audience will be encouraged to discuss how collective efforts of nonprofits, institutions, municipalities can support disadvantaged communities transition to affordable, energy efficient, and health sustaining housing. My name is Dana Gray. I serve as the Community Outreach Coordinator at Tower Grove Community Development Corporation. We're an affordable housing provider here in St. Louis, Missouri. And I lead our organization's energy advocacy and a landlord and rehabber training program. And I'm a member of the Missouri Energy Efficiency for All Coalition. A little bit of history about Energy Efficiency for All. It's an initiative that was seeded in 2014 with support from the JPB Foundation and 4 national organizations focused on energy and housing issues. Those include the Energy Foundation, the National Housing Trust, the Natural Resource Defense Council, and Elevate. Energy Efficiency for All coalitions have achieved significant accomplishments in the last 9 years, notably moving hundreds of millions of dollars into energy efficiency programs that benefit those in affordable multifamily housing across 12 states. It's also helped build 12 state coalitions comprised of organizations who are on the ground doing work advocating for policies and programs to support eliminating burdens related to both housing and energy. The states, you know what? There we go. All right. The states include Maryland, New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Georgia, Louisiana, North Carolina, Virginia, and California. Energy Efficiency for All builds collective power to ensure that all renters live in homes that are affordable and healthy. EFA coalitions receive training, coaching, and technical expertise to ensure that our advocacy was effective. Coalitions have included professionals from energy, environment, affordable housing, public policy, and low-income advocacy endeavors. The collective efforts have increased available funding from utility companies and state energy offices by $769 million for retrofitting housing, increasing energy efficiency, comfort, and affordability. This impact has allowed families with low incomes to have money for other necessities and improve their health, meaning they're able to go to work or school. The advocacy of EFA coalitions has created a seat at the table for the concerns of households with low incomes. This advocacy improves housing affordability, helps preserve existing housing stock, and creates thousands of good-paying jobs, reduces the greenhouse gas emissions. Our purpose is that the threat of climate change has inspired a global movement to ensure that the human race has a future and that we cease our reckless assault on our planet. This movement has many facets, and the magnitude of the crisis often fails to recognize the core problem. We can't lose our home. Solutions to climate change often purposefully ignore the situations and needs of BIPOC communities, even when those communities are even a more severe and immediate risk of climate displacement. Concurrently, a long history and continuation of systemically oppressive and racist policies in housing, energy, transportation, and the environment, which have created barriers to equitable housing, energy affordability, and accessibility, leaving communities under-resourced while also vulnerable to climate-related disasters. Our mission is to ensure the protection of people and communities impacted by housing and energy insecurity. Energy Efficiency for All is dedicated to the transformation of racist policies and practices to ensure that resilient and healthy housing is guaranteed for people and communities that have been left behind. We strive for a system that helps residents mitigate the next crisis, not simply survive it. Resilience must be measured by the ability to protect the most vulnerable members of our society from rising energy, water, and housing costs, and the unavoidable disasters that occur with troubling regularity. We must redefine resiliency so that we immediately reduce greenhouse gas emissions, remove fossil fuels from our homes, eliminate high home energy burden and housing burdens, and improve the health and quality of our built environment. Standing before you are members of the Energy Efficiency for All coalitions in Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, and Missouri. And one of those folks is on Zoom. So they're not actually standing here. Each panelist will share highlights of their state coalition's advocacy efforts and the current priority and challenge. Then we will invite you to discuss our collective efforts, the efforts of nonprofits, institutions, and municipalities, and how we will each support disadvantaged communities' transition to affordable, energy efficient, health sustaining housing. And when I say we, I mean everyone inside and outside of the room. So I want to introduce our speakers, Ms. Arlinda Bajrami, Metric Giles, Andrew Linares, and Brittany Turner, and invite Ms. Arlinda to be our first speaker. Arlinda is a policy and stakeholder engagement manager with Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance based in Chicago, Illinois. She is a proponent of community-led equitable solutions with experience in policy development and community organizing. You press that button to advance.
Yes, thanks everyone for being here today. Like Dana said, I'm with Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, also known as MIA. Just a quick background about MIA. We are a nonprofit membership-based organization promoting energy efficiency policy and programs in the Midwest. And those are some of the states that we serve here in the Midwest on that map. So I'm going to dive into Illinois EFA. I'm representing Illinois EFA today. I'm fairly new to EFA. I think I started in October with EFA. So these are some of the organizations, some of our partners. We have the Illinois Citizens Utility Board, People for Community Recovery, more of a local organization in Chicago. And then we have some of our bigger national organizations like Elevate, National Resource Defense Council, and so on. And then we do have allies that we work with and some other community-based organizations in Illinois to achieve our goals. And so I want to dive into the highlights for Illinois EFA. A lot of the last couple of years, we've been working on passing some big bills in Illinois. In 2016, the Future Energy Jobs Act, also known as FEJA, was passed, which set the state's energy efficiency portfolio standards for electric utilities. So that did not include our gas utilities in Illinois. But what Illinois EFA partners and members did was educate the public and communities of the energy efficiency programs that exist and that expanded with this act. And then in the next coming years, we recently were able to pass the Climate Equitable Jobs Act, also known as CEJA, which is huge just in the Midwest in general, but in the state specifically. So a lot of the EFA partners and advocates and allies work to expand the low income qualified multifamily programs for energy efficiency with our utilities, and then created several different resources, especially for solar job training too. And then also another big highlight for EFA members were a lot of our EFA partners were involved in negotiations with the utilities around their 4-year plans. So just the recent plans that were filed were the 2022 through 2025 plans, which expanded income qualified programs again, and investments. And then one of the big things I think EFA Illinois accomplished with this as well is that grassroots and environmental justice organizations were for the first time involved in negotiation processes. So that was huge for Illinois, a huge accomplishment that IFA members were able to work with our grassroots environmental justice organizations. And they were able to advocate for more equitable and affordable programs for energy efficiency. So I know that's like a quick deep dive, but we can talk about that more when we're asking questions. And some of our challenges that we've had in Illinois is just the continuation and finding, effective outreach and engagement strategies, reaching different communities and hard to reach customers. Also, I think accessibility of programs and resources is a big challenge, not just for Illinois, but I think, throughout the country as well, is that folks and communities are still not provided, I think, enough accessibility to some of the programs that exist, even with these new bills that have been passed in Illinois. And then just capacity. I think in general, a lot of us understand here in the room that a lot of organizations, lack capacity sometimes or are underfunded, and burnout is real as well. And then some of our priorities are the continuation of implementing our Climate Equitable Jobs Act. It is a pretty big and complex, I think, law, and there's different working groups and committees involved. So just making sure that we are still continuing to be involved in that as a coalition in Illinois, and making sure things are getting done as well. And I think another thing that a lot of IFA partners in Illinois have talked about is continuing to intersect energy efficiency and affordability issues. Energy efficiency is the cheapest way to reach some of our climate goals. And so making sure that we're intersecting those issues of energy efficiency and affordability, and then continuing outreach. We all know that is a struggle, I think, with a lot of us, a challenge, especially, for some of the community-based organizations, and making sure that we're working with utilities, or utilities are working with us too. And then looking into opportunities that are coming through from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act as well. So yeah, I know that was quick, but I wanted to leave room for my colleagues to discuss, and we'll stay connected after this. And I'll pass it over to Metric.
And Metric Giles is the Executive Director and Policy Coordinator with the Community Stabilization Project in St. Paul, Minnesota, which advocates for renters' rights. Community Stabilization Projects focuses on stabilizing renters, property owners, energy efficiency, and food justice related to well-being of families and communities. Metric works collaboratively towards systemic institutional outcomes that create regenerative growth. You're up, Metric.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm not much of a tech person here, so you have to kind of come along with me on this. So 10 minutes. So we have this PowerPoint here, which we are not going to do a lot of focus on the PowerPoint, but we want you to see it. It will be online and for the follow-up. I do want to start with the goals, though. And do you see those goals up there? And so I would like to have some audience participation here. So can someone volunteer to read the first one?
I got it. You got it.
All right. And with all these goals, I'm hoping people ask later on, what do all those things mean? Number 2.
Establish a right to equitable, efficient housing in state law and implementing action.
Number 3.
Establish a right to utility service and to be free from the harms of utility shutoffs.
4.
Enforce sufficient housing standards for renters and help create investment in
All right. And number 5.
Bold, ambitious energy investment at scale by state and local decision makers.
And number 6.
Back there in the back, you had your hand.
Local governments play an active role in ensuring equitable, efficient housing justice.
I would think, thank you all. I would think everyone in this room probably have similar goals, that this isn't nothing new. So what I don't want to be doing up here is talking about things that we all know already, right? So community stabilization, we say renter stability will lead to community stability. Why do we say that? Because 80% of home ownership is Europeans. So everybody is saying, let's increase that, and change that other 20%. So do we work on that 20% or do we work on the 80% of BIPOC community people? Because it must, if we aren't homeowners, the 80% must be BIPOC. So we want to recognize that. And we say, in order for them to have not to become homeowners, but to have a choice, then we have to stabilize them. A choice if they want to continue to be renters or if they want to be homeowners. So the piece that goes along with that is representation. That's what we're talking about. Representation in the decision-making of those policies and those issues and those initiatives that will allow them to become stable. I asked a question for this room here. How many people in this room are renters? Right. How many people are homeowners? Right. Third question, how many people have their mortgage paid off? One person has their mortgage paid off. What makes you, the people who say that they're renters and people who say that they're acting, I said you're homeowners, what makes the difference in that? Anybody know? The difference is who developed the policies that went along with the homeowners or renters. So representation is very, very important. So in Minnesota, we actually have a lot of initiatives that we're working on where we have bodies of people that are coming together. You know, the thing that is missing from that? Representation. Who is at the table? I was with, we went to one meeting and a person said, well, first thing we should do is say, what are we working on? And then after that, we say, who are the stakeholders? I'm going to use the word stakeholders. I'm really on this language thing because I have a thing about stakeholders, but we won't get sidetracked with that today. But we say, who are the stakeholders? So if we're working on any housing issue that is related to also that's going to impact renters, and we say, who are the stakeholders? Then the next question, do we have renters in the room? And the question is, and the outcome is we have no renters or we have 2 renters. Is that proper representation? So that's something I'm saying that everyone in this room, when you're in your meetings, that's one question you should, 2 questions you should say. And that doesn't mean you have to stop your meeting, but you have to say, we cannot have an outcome that we can make decisions on for people who are not in the room. Does that make sense? All right, that makes sure sense. So the other piece about Minnesota EFA is the human rights. So we're saying that, and we're working on it, we haven't actually started the policy activation of it, is that we actually would like to have energy and housing to be declared as a human right. So where do you start that? If you can start, it would be great if we could, the 12 members could do that. If we can't do that, we can do it at your state level. You do it at your county level. You do it at your city level. How much time do I have?
You can take 4 or 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. So when you do that, why do we want that to be declared as a human right? Do anybody, I shouldn't get into the answering questions because we'll have that later. But why do we want a foundation? You heard of the little pig's story, about, the wolf came and blew the house down because it wasn't a solid foundation. We're working on a lot of initiatives, but do we have a solid foundation to build on? So we do need to have human energy and housing. I mean, we should have food as a human right too. But for the work that we're doing, we need a foundation, a collective foundation, wherever we go to and someone say, why are you doing this? We can say, because energy is a human right. Right. The next thing that we have got really caught up in is equity. Like, it's kind of like this word we keep talking about, equity. What we're talking about, and again, we're formulating this. We're in a process, and like equity is almost a living blueprint. But what we are adding to it is actionable equity, because we can no longer settle for just equity. We need to have equitable equity. And what will actionable equity do that is different? We will have a measurable accountability of the work that we're doing. Because right now we're using that word equity and it just has become like, what does it mean? Someone said real simply, what's the point if it doesn't have a measurable, actionable impact with the work that we're doing? It's kind of like to bring this to kind of like, I'm a visual person. So what we want is, we got these seeds and we actually, now we understand from a sense of awareness that we don't want to plant GMO seeds. We don't want to plant plants that that are not organic. We're trying to provide healthy outcomes. We all get together and we know we want to change to make people have healthy eating habits, eat healthy food. And we plant these plants and they all come up really good. But what happens, did we actually succeed in what we said we was going to do?
No, people.
No. Well, you know why? You know what the thing is that we forgot to do? What we didn't think that we had to start with? We didn't look at the soil. The soil, what we're working and what we're going to put those seeds in and what we're going to plant those plants in is the most important piece of what comes out. Even if we start with, the good intentions, we had to move to intentionality. And when I talk about intentionality, we need to fertilize the soil. So when I'm talking about fertilizing the soil with all the work that we're doing, a lot of that work is grounded in what is existing. And the soil that we have and the foundations and the platforms of our different policies and democracies and institutions, that's unhealthy soil. So we had to start with, I'm going to close with this, and I'm plagiarizing, came from the University of Minnesota. I was in a workshop and they said, well, they used, what do we want to preserve? So think about what we're starting with. What do we want to preserve? And we have to do that very analytical. And if we're talking about renters, we're also talking about BIPOC community. We're talking about undoing racism. We're talking about undoing white supremacy. So that means that it's going to be very uncomfortable. So when it becomes uncomfortable, when we look at what we want to preserve, we have to look at it very analytical. And then we say, okay, now that we have looked at it, there's some really good things in here. And then we have to say, now what do we want to change? And then the hardest part of it is how do we create that change? And we cannot rebuild the master's house using the same tools of the master used to build it. We cannot do that. So the piece of our work here in Minnesota IFA, we're in that journey. I want to bring it back to Minnesota IFA. We're in that journey and we're working on it. But one thing I know that is really great about being in this space today is that it's a Midwest. And I really want to thank Dana for her work and really helping keeping us together in that collaboration. We might work in that silo of what we're doing in Minnesota, what Illinois is doing, what Michigan is doing. What's the other one?
Missouri.
What Missouri is doing. But we have to come together and do it together. It's very important. And we have those uncomfortable conversations about change. Murray, she's my co-lead here in Minnesota, and she's really patient with me. She's really patient with me about the work I'm doing. So I just want to say thank you, and hopefully I have stimulated some thoughts. Now, I'm not asking people to agree with it. I'm hoping I'm delivering a message that can be received. Thank you. You know what? Excuse me, I didn't even go through the rest of my things. I don't want to go through them, man. Maybe we can go back through the rest of them, but we have been doing some good things. I forgot about that. So thank you.
Thank you, Metric. Andrew Linares will be up next. He is the Regional Director and Senior Counsel of Renew Missouri in St. Louis, Missouri. And Andrew engages with state and local leaders on the issues of clean energy policy, including St. Louis City, county, and state government, the renewable energy and energy efficiency industries, utilities, and corporate partners. He serves as the Missouri State Lead for the Energy Efficiency for All Coalition.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thanks, Dana. And so thank you, Arlinda and Metric. You heard Arlinda give you a little information about the Clean Energy Jobs Act, CEJA in Illinois, and what's going on with their coalition. Metric really eloquently summarized some thoughts around representation, equity, changing the framing for how work gets done. And I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts of like what an advocate in the energy and housing space actually does in the state government. And then maybe pose a challenge or like frame a future challenge that we are going to be encountering, just so you guys have a sense of like what this work involves. So yeah, I work with Renew Missouri. We're a statewide clean energy advocate. And I run our St. Louis office, so we do state and local policy interfacing with the industries and the utilities. And where the rubber meets the road is the Public Service Commission or the Public Utilities Commission in other states. And this is the state body that regulates utilities in a state like Missouri or Minnesota. Utilities are monopolies designated by the government. They have designated territory, designated customers, and they have to go get a rate increase at the state Public Service Commission. So that opens the door for stakeholders, for parties to formally intervene, present evidence, try to win a legal case, right? And that's for everything. That's for rate increases. That's for new programs. So that is a place for attorneys and grassroots organizations to make a case and get something done. And so when I was recruited to join the Energy Efficiency for All Coalition, I was just a staff attorney and got recruited to start running our Missouri State Coalition. And the first step we took was to convene all these interested parties and try to identify why is it so hard to advance energy efficiency and affordable housing, right? So we actually had these over at the Missouri Botanical Gardens Earth Waste Center, and then later out in Kansas City with the utility out there. And we identified all these barriers. We got all the parties in a room and agreed around a goal, which is let's make affordable housing a little bit more efficient. Stuff like the split incentive problem. I think I have that written up here. So that's just for a little flavor. That means if you are a renter and you pay your utility bill, but you don't own the property, you don't have an incentive to dump a bunch of money into the property. Right. So you got to stick with basically the efficiency level it's at. And if you're an owner of the property and you're not paying the bill, you have no incentive because your investment isn't going to bring you back savings. So that sort of dynamic can be bridged with various policy approaches that are designed to overcome it. So that was the type of thing that we got up to. The next step comes formal intervention at the Public Service Commission. So in our case, I acted as an attorney and represented like my own party and one of our partners. We got in there and we offered testimony, like technical testimony about here are some program designs that have worked elsewhere. Here's the public policy reason why you should care about this. You should offer this incentive level, if the incentive level for a new HVAC unit is X, we think it should be X plus 5 because for a certain income level in order to overcome the barriers for that sector. And so that progresses. Eventually, we're in negotiations directly with utilities, Fortune 500 companies, right? And this is a combination of grassroots pressure to make it hurt for the utility to not be responding to these concerns. And then the grass tops effort, well-funded attorneys, experts to help design the programs and settle them. And eventually you end up with an official tariff, a budget, a kilowatt hour savings target. And this all eventually gets put in front of the commission and approved. So that's sort of how it goes. And then the whole next series of years or decade in this case about is implementation and trying to figure out, okay, eligibility is really too complicated. We need to streamline how you are eligible for these incentives, or the marketing approach is just not getting to the people that need it the most. So we need to tailor that. And it actually ends up being that, you know, us as clean energy advocates, we find ourselves on the other side of utilities in an adversarial relationship a lot. And in the efficiency space, it really has become that we're allies and that we can kind of negotiate and work together. So that's just a little flavor of how the actual advocacy process works. The substantive stuff that we are fighting for here, I kind of put it into this analogy. I think we use this with our EFA coalition of the cookbook or the recipe. What we want for the affordable housing space, so that could be multifamily, single family, is a one-stop shop model. Really what this means is there's a single point of contact. If you pick up the phone as a tenant or as a income eligible qualifying homeowner or as a building owner of affordable housing, that should be all you have to do. You've expressed interest in the program. You're going to get a free building evaluation, a comprehensive building evaluation that's going to identify all the measures that you could do. And that's going to take care of your eligibility. Hopefully that qualifies you for a higher incentive than just the market rate, right? So those three pieces, the one-stop shop model, the comprehensive whole building approach, not just LED light bulbs, but let's identify everything that can be done in the property and then as high an incentive as possible. And you could add a couple side dishes here. I think financing is really key. People know to contact their utility. They don't necessarily know how to go onto the internet and like search the entire menu of financing options available to them. So we really want it to be a single stream delivery service, including financing that goes through the utility. So that's kind of what we're working on. Also, gas utilities should be in the mix here. They should be able to combine with electric utilities, their incentives. So like attic insulation, for example, saves in the summer, saves in the winter. Those should get a double incentive. So, and then the final thing I put under side dishes is encouraging affordable housing to be efficient in the building phase. And that has to do with these low income housing tax credits. That's a whole other thing, but that's a part of our work as well. Okay, so that was a whirlwind. Now I want to pose this one specific thing here. I think this is like one of the main challenges for energy efficiency, specifically for income eligible and underserviced communities. And that is, how do we get everybody to switch to heat pumps? Now, do folks know what heat pumps are? An air source heat pump? Okay, so it is the next big thing. And it is what everyone should be installing, especially after the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. Basically, they use the outside air as the source for heat or source for cooling in the summer. And they've come down in price tremendously in the last 2-3 years. Their efficiency has really increased dramatically. And it's still a really high price point. But crucially, it lets you heat and cool your house, right? And you don't have to take out a gas furnace or your gas infrastructure. It goes right on top. And there are just tons of incentives. There's a flood of money coming down in the next couple of years for these, especially specifically under the IRA, like I mentioned. This High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Act, or HERA, you could potentially get $8,000 depending on your income for a heat pump, okay? And you could also take a tax credit. You can also go to your utility. That's the first place you go, is you get your rebate from your utility to install this. And then you're left with a balance. And we want to design financing that's delivered through the utility to take that balance. So all you have to do is express interest. You get a home evaluation or a business of, building evaluation. The utility lays out all the financing. So you start saving on day one and you're not out a penny. And the technology allows us to do this. It is purely a bureaucratic administrative challenge that we have to just put all these resources together. So I think that's the main thing that I'd like to see utilities and efficiency stakeholders focus on. And and thanks for listening. I think I can hand over to Brittany now.
Thanks, Andrew. Brittany Turner is a senior energy analyst at EcoWorks in Detroit, Michigan, providing services at the intersection of community development and sustainability. While EcoWorks' roots are firmly planted in energy conservation, they have grown to emphasize all aspects of sustainable development as it relates to building affordable, energy-efficient residential housing and commercial buildings. Brittany serves as the state lead for the Michigan Energy Efficiency for All Coalition, and recently she worked with the city of Ann Arbor to develop a home energy concierge service. Miss Brittany?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Let me hear you say good morning.
Morning.
All right, everyone is alive. I can only see the panelists. I can't see you. But I am excited to be here virtually. Again, as Dana said, my name is Brittany Turner. I'm a senior energy analyst at EcoWorks and the state lead for our Michigan Energy Efficiency for All. So can someone click to the next slide for me? Thank you. Here is an image of the different logos for each of the organizations involved in our coalition. So we have quite a few organizations in Michigan that are involved. So just to go through that list, we have some energy efficiency. I like to define them as energy efficiency technical implementers. So EcoWorks, we're one of those. We are a Detroit community-based organization, and we do a lot of the implementation work for our utilities, energy efficiency assistance programs. We also have Elevate, which is headquartered out of Chicago, Illinois. Then for state policy advocates, we have our Michigan Environmental Council, which is based out of Lansing, Michigan, and Ecology Center, which is based out of Ann Arbor. They both do a lot of advocacy work when it comes to the legislative and executive branches of government. Then we have our environmental justice policy advocates in our frontline organizations. So we have two, which is Solidarity, which is out of Highland Park, which is unique because it's a little city that's inside of Detroit. But they're doing great work to install solar streetlights and so much more work. Now, they actually do quite a bit of advocacy and intervention work with utilities. But Solidarity, interestingly, started out because the streetlights were repossessed by the utility because the city couldn't pay for it. So their work has been going on for a while and is very impactful. We have Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition, which is also based in Detroit, and Sierra Club, which is not listed here for a logo. And then we have our Midwest and national environmental policy advocates. So we have Natural Resource Defense Council, Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, MIA, and National Housing Trust. And we also have a community development financial institution, so LISC Detroit. You can go to the next slide. All right, so I am going to talk about walk-away issues, and I'll explain what that is. So the problem we are addressing in Michigan is that many under-resourced Michiganders are living in homes falling into disrepair due to limited finances and ability to complete the home repairs. And although we have various federal, state, and utility programs to assist folks to improve their home comfort and reduce energy bills, Many homeowners and renters are unable to utilize those programs due to program restrictions on use of funds to address home repairs. So these programs can only make improvements to a home that would make it more energy efficient, but they're not designed as a repair or rehab program. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So to talk a little bit more about what that looks like in Michigan, about 1,638 homes are weatherized per year by weatherization programs in Michigan. However, 2.9 million Michigan households are income qualified for weatherization, but many are not qualified due to lack of program funding and the need to address health and safety issues first. Next slide. So over 836 applicants are deferred annually due to these funding restrictions for health and safety repair measures. So to define that word, deferred means someone applied for like a utility energy efficiency assistance program, and they were told that they couldn't get that refrigerator or that new furnace because they had mold or bad roof or some health and safety issue that prevented them from tightening the building envelope. So that's what we mean by deferrals. And so then that agency has to walk away from that home. So to break down some of what causes a deferral, and then I'll go into this more on the next slide too, are a couple of different things. So shown in the graph to the top left, there are 5 main causes for deferrals. Vermiculite insulation, which usually has asbestos contamination, roof repairs, if you have old knob and tube electrical wiring, structural issues, and mold and moisture or sewage related issues. So you see the breakdown in that graph, the circle graph, and the one at the bottom shows the average cost to rectify deferral. So you can see that all health and safety repairs come in under $10,000 each. So they're not incredibly expensive to address. So in Michigan, we've been working to figure out how can we create programs where we can address these issues so that folks can live in a safe and healthy home and have it weatherized to improve comfort and reduce their energy cost. So the next slide, this dives into it a little bit more. So homes may have multiple causes for deferrals based on estimates. 85% of each deferral issue could be corrected for $5,000 or less. And these charts break down deferral categories and cost. So that top one, you see structural issues. You're looking at something that's like $2,500 for crawl space, or higher end $6,000 for like a home repair, minor structural repairs. You're looking at roof repairs, knob and tube. I know I mentioned a couple of these before. So then if we go on to the next slide. So what we've done in Michigan is our coalition is working diligently to secure solutions so that communities are not left behind. And one of our biggest successes over the past few years was intervening in two of our biggest investor-owned utilities, which is DTE and Consumers Energy. So some of our MIFA partners intervened in what's called their energy waste reduction plans. So these are plans that utilities pull together every year to outline their programs to address energy efficiency. And so in their planning efforts, we intervened and were able to secure a health and safety pilot. And we're now in the 3rd year of that plan. So our MIFA partner, Alexis Blissman from the Ecology Center, and her partners at Habitat for Humanity were able to secure millions of dollars for health and safety pilots to address these walkway issues over 3 years. So as of today, the pilots are in their 3rd year, and we are working to make legislative changes that will allow them to become a permanent part of the income qualified program offerings for all utilities in Michigan. So not just these 2 biggest ones, but all of the investor owned ones and also the municipally owned utilities. So it doesn't stop there. We are also advocating for a home repair program within our Department of Health and Human Services. This is the same agency that houses our weatherization assistance program. And if you're not familiar with that, that is actually a federal program. And each state implements it. So for ours, ours is housed in that our Department of Health and Human Services. So the goal is to introduce a state program that addresses whole home solutions and braids the various funding opportunities from from federal, state, local, and utility programs. So the goal is that by putting it in the same department as our weatherization assistance program, we can kind of help with the siloing issues of different programs coming from different agencies, and hopefully provide funding from the state budget that will address health and safety issues also within our state and federal programs. And I will stop there.
All right. Thank you, Brittany. So just show of hands from all of you, who is here representing a municipality, a city government? Awesome. Who's here representing a university? Either you work for the university or you're a student of the university. All right. And who's here representing a corporation, a company? Who's here representing a not-for-profit or, okay. All right. So we've got a good mix. I'm hoping I'm going to pose some questions to our panel, and then I would like to elicit some contribution or thoughts from you all as well. So first, Andrew, I believe you've got some stats that you're ready to share with regards to experience with energy affordability and the relationship to health and or poverty. You have been engaged in a green and healthy homes and energy burden study. Can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, and I might be light on the actual stats, but I don't think those are as interesting.
Okay.
Anyway, but yeah, I can talk quickly about the connection that public health has here with energy efficiency. Does anybody work adjacent to health or in the public health field? Couple. Okay, so the indoor air environment in the home is obviously a huge factor in public health and in community health. It corresponds to income. We know that certain public health conditions, respiratory conditions correspond to race, correspond to the age of the home, corresponds to the specific neighborhoods, the history of redlining and discrimination. So there's these things don't exist independent. They have factors that we can point back to. And energy, the efficiency of the home is connected with this as well. So groups like the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, which has been an EFA partner for many years, have studied this. It's sometimes referred to as the health energy nexus, all tied up together basically. And essentially we can more or less predict what the macro health trend of a community is going to be based on the efficiency in that community of the home, the building materials used in the home, and the income levels used in the home, sometimes even just the racial affiliation of the area. So when you look in, I encourage you to go to Green Healthy Homes Initiative and look into that if you're curious about it, but it's striking. I mean, these are solid correlations. And then the other piece that you brought up here, Dana, is the concept of energy burden, which is a phrase that's being thrown around a lot. Renew Missouri is working on a energy burden analysis and community engagement project right now. And basically the concept of energy burden is the percentage of a household income that goes to energy costs, right? So as your income goes up, even if you're a huge consumer of energy, you have a smaller energy burden. As your income goes down, even if you kind of don't use much energy, you have a higher energy burden, a higher percentage. And that too, high energy burden is correlated to various communities, various racial affiliations, the age of the home, the health outcomes for communities. So all this is to say that when we develop a portfolio of energy efficiency programs with the utility or with various stakeholders or with state government or whatever we're doing, we don't just want to design a program and say, come one, come all, come apply. We actually want to deliver the program strategically to communities that could use the assistance the most. And we can do that with data. We can segment the residential market to see who has the highest energy burden, maybe by just aggregate by zip code, which is what or a census tract, which is what our project is doing, where the utility could actually do it at the meter level and say, here are the 100 highest energy burden customers. And we'll have a sliding scale. You have a higher incentive if you're one of those or something like that. So I think that is part of the future of how you deliver efficiency programs is actually know who your intended customer is and be acting in a way to get like the most efficient outcome that you're looking for, which is how to help the people that need it the most.
Question?
Together, so operating in a pretty tough regulatory and legislative landscape where so many of these things are like politically out of reach for us, but
Yeah.
Still advocating for some of these.
We thought it was out of reach for us too. so You're not alone.
Equity and
Yeah.
justice-focused solutions are great. Do you believe that we can get to eliminating energy burden with just some of these targeted efficiency programs alone? Or should we copy kind of what we think of in the healthcare landscape as maybe single payer energy, where we just, wipe away this idea that people shouldn't have access to energy unless they can afford it? Because for some of these people, as many programs like this, they're still in arrears. They're still
Yeah.
fighting huge bills.
Yeah.
And there's only so much help the state can offer. So if we drop it to like 6% of income, you only pay what you can afford. That makes energy truly equitable to me. However, then we have to answer the question of how do we encourage efficiency? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and then I can pass off here. So yeah, in terms of the idea of like capping energy burden at a percentage or something, I think that's right out the gate infeasible. No state's going to do that, but it's a goal that you can establish and provide incentives to utilities to try to accomplish. Maybe if they hit benchmarks, they get a higher return on how much money they're making or whatever. A performance incentive for how their programs operate, right? And if they lower the overall energy burden to a certain metric, maybe they get rewarded for that. I mean, that's the key here is utilities a lot of the time in the electric space are, they're some of the biggest companies that are still regulated at the state level, right? So they own the state, and often they own the state legislature, or at least they can block anything that they want, and they have a lot of power at the PSC. But they want to make money, and we can bribe them. We can just give them money to do what we want them to do, right? That's what the role of the advocate is to come in and go, all right, how do we all agree that you're going to do what we want you to do? Here's some money. And like that's how we've gotten our programs here in Missouri is, yeah.
Explain though, when you say bribe them, it's because at the state level, law was passed that allowed for the investor-owned utilities to charge all of their customers for energy efficiency programs that they were going to offer. So when you look on here it's Ameren, when you look on your Ameren bill, every single one of us have like a $6 or $7 bill every month that we're paying the utility company to offer these rebates. So that's the bribe.
Yes, I'm being coarse with my language there, but it is. We're giving the utility money to do what is not in their interest, which is to sell less of their product through efficiency, right? And the way you're doing that is you're letting them recover a return on whatever they spend trying to help people save money. So my answer is yes. I think it's admirable to set those sorts of goals, energy burden reduction targets and stuff like that. But the key is you don't even necessarily at the end of the day need to, and metric might totally disagree with me here. You don't necessarily need to frame things in terms of equity if that is toxic at your PSC. I mean, maybe you want to do that in building power in your community, but when you get to the commission, you want to show the utility the money. And if they're on the same side, if they're pointed in the money direction, we can get them to do things. So.
They're all pointed in the money direction, most definitely. You have a question?
Yes, so thank you for your presentation. You speak the language I speak because I'm an economist, just reading up all the different incentives that are out there. I'm just wondering, this is we are in this room, we are targeting people from the BIPOC community. How likely are they willing, how likely will they be to take advantage of those incentives? As an economist, when I'm actually designing these kinds of policies and studying them, I don't think about the person because that's not how I operate scientifically. So how do you make sure that different people, depending upon who they are, take advantage of these incentives? Because people's relationship with money and the way they view money individually and as a community is very, very different. And I don't think that utilities are being bribed, that's economically feasible. And I say in economic circles, bad policy makes for very good economic research. So this is an example of that.
Yeah. So I can share that here through the landlord and rehabber training that I coordinate, we've had sessions where we teach the audience on all of the different energy efficiency rebate programs that are available and lay out the financial advantages for them to make these improvements. And trying to reach and to educate renters is really important, but in the end, it's the property owner that needs to be educated. So the renter can put pressure on the landlord or landlady to make improvements, but in the end, we really need to reach that property owner. I would say, does anybody else have something to add what you've been doing from your state?
Well, one thing for me, I'm like, we keep talking about programs, and programs is not the solution for people. We need policies that, like the lady back in the back said, well, how do we know that they're gonna accept these things or even have awareness of it? For the most part, if we keep utilizing the system that we have right now, they will not know about it. They will not have that awareness. When they do get that awareness of that there's a program or resource, then there will be no navigation to that. So, do we keep working within the boundaries of what we have? And I would say, no, we cannot do that. We cannot continue to keep providing programs. And again, I go back to that representation. If you don't provide an avenue of relevance to me, besides just me thinking that all I have to do constantly is to pay my bills, and that's all I'm trying to do and not get involved in why my bills are so high, we need to change that avenue. I do really want to apologize because some of that is in here. in that PowerPoint. And for, I really do apologize for that, for not showing that.
It'll be posted.
And they will be posted and you look at it. But again, we had to move beyond programs. And again, why do we stay within income qualified? And we're saying energy is a human right for everyone. We should not, we have to have policies that make it inclusive and accessible for everyone, not a program that is limited to a few. And then say the only way they get it, they need to stay within those income guidelines, sustaining people in poverty.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question, but I don't know.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to ask this. I feel like we keep dancing around this topic, which is, the utility model is to sell as much energy as possible to make as much money as possible. So when we're talking about energy efficiency, we're saying we need this energy efficiency, we need it to reach these people. The utilities are only willing to go so far, right? They're only willing to put a hand out, but what we need is completely reformed energy efficiency for everybody. And when you ask the question, like, how do we actually reach these communities? Well, these are people who are, working 3 jobs, who are, just trying to make the bills happen. They're cutting out taking their meds so that they can pay for their energy bills. It's not a question of whether they want to do it. It's they need to have this very accessible and laid out for them. And the question for me is, when we're talking about these programs that are available, we're talking about, how we can actually make this happen. I just keep running into this issue of this big model, right? How do we work around this? How do we make sure that we're actually, addressing this issue that is the larger model, the larger picture of the utility model? So I wondered if the panelists had anything to say to that.
Go ahead. Somebody's got an answer.
I mean, so there are a couple options. Like we can change the way we regulate utilities. We can deregulate. That's what Illinois has done, and other states. Michigan, I think, is like partially deregulated. Okay, but you're not doing away with capitalism. Energy is a commodity. People are going to make money on it. We can dream about changing that, but as you get bigger and bigger, you're talking about like total institutional reform, which is interesting. But if we're gonna focus on how to get services to people and how to make differences in people's lives and how to empower people, we're stuck with the fact that people make money on energy. And I think the concept of a navigator that you raised is the key here. So like I know I've dealt a lot with programs and gone and tried to fight for 10% more budget and a little bit higher incentive and all that. But once that's passed, that's just like the first part of the fight. And then in my opinion, like I don't think it's an education. I don't necessarily think education of the public or whatever is the thing here. I really don't think it should be the responsibility of the tenant or the homeowner or whatever to know about every program and every thing and how to apply. I think it should be the people making money off them should take care of being the concierge service, the guide, the navigator through all of it, put it together for them, have them present them with the deal and have them sign on the dotted line. So that's the idea of the one-stop shop that we're talking about. We're really far away from this because now it's not just utility incentives, but it's tons of federal money, which includes grants, rebates, and tax incentives. And then on top of the utility and the governmental resources, there's financing, right? And really that needs to be all made extremely easy. And let's just remember, like people are making money off of energy efficiency. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Ameren, Missouri, biggest utility in Missouri. Xcel in Minnesota. What's your guys' big utility? ComEd. They're making tons of money on this, and we should insist that they take the responsibility for putting all the resources together and presenting it to people in an easy way.
Yeah, and I can also piggyback on that.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
So two things I wanted to add to that is looking at like how to change the system. I have been working with Ann Arbor, and we're also trying to model this in Detroit. But working with Ann Arbor on, we initially been calling it a home energy concierge. I think the name is going to change to home energy advisor. But Ann Arbor has been very proactive when it comes to like trying to address climate change and high energy cost. And so one thing they did was they passed a climate millage in the fall. A climate millage. So this would be an additional tax that's going to pay for 20 years of different programming that will go back to the community. So Ann Arbor is a wealthy community. Doesn't mean it doesn't have vulnerable communities within it. It definitely does. But it is a wealthier community too that's able to tax itself. So we're working with Ann Arbor, and they're really working. They eventually want to like be their own municipal utility, like get out of being under the thumb of the big investor-owned utility. And so we're working with them, and we're piloting this starting in April. So it'll be where, and I'm the first advisor, so I'll be the person helping people at first. But we're doing it where anyone, like wherever you fall at on the income spectrum, whether you're a landlord or renter and single family, multifamily housing, you can reach out to us and we'll offer a free service to help you identify what you need to do to like address your immediate need, whatever that need is. And so we have some funding from various foundations and from that climate millage to fund that. But that's a way where we're trying to like Ann Arbor is not its own municipal utility. The main utility is the biggest utility, DTE. But before we can get to something like that, we're really trying to be the source to like understand all of the different programs out there to help people achieve what they're trying to do. So, and we're also looking at doing this in Detroit too, which is like the total opposite side of the coin when it comes to looking at wealth and access compared to Ann Arbor. But that's just some of what we're trying to do to help people directly. And then Ann Arbor is trying to become a municipal utility. So maybe that's a solution for some communities to fight this whole, capitalism issue and the utilities just trying to make the most money possible.
Metric, you had something to add?
I
to
want
the
this lady
systems
back
change?
here first to
Yes.
share what she
Go
wants to
ahead.
say.
Really notice that folks who would be pursuing these programs, the folks that we're talking about who would be benefiting from these, weatherization programs are a great example. In our community, and I'm speaking from Carbondale, Illinois, which is southern Illinois, we're deregulated. Folks that we're talking about are oftentimes elders who are on fixed income, who cannot afford the rate hikes that we're seeing, and are choosing instead, and it's not really a choice, to turn the thermostat down to 50 and freeze in their homes. That's the form of weatherization that they're having to pursue because the program is available, because of just a variety of communication difficulties that we're having. So in line, I'm wondering if our panelists could offer any advice related to public power communities, related to publicly owned utilities, related to municipal owned electricity, because I think that's the direction of a lot of the questions that I can. Okay, how can we be looking, as was touched on earlier from the gentleman from St. Paul, how can we be looking at energy the same way that we look at clean water? How can we be looking at that provision to our community, that equitable provision to our community that doesn't place the burden of responsibility into either figuring out the weatherization assistance program or pursuing them or navigating what that looks like, or even being aware that that's something that needs to happen, not placing that burden on folks and instead taking on that burden as a public entity in some way, shape, or form. I would argue that that's a responsibility. And I'm hoping that our panelists have experience in one of those areas with the old utilities or, by the other names that they're known.
I do have experience with St. Paul Regional Water Services, which is what is a city-owned, publicly owned utility versus the privately owned of the gas and the electric. And I do think that they're the best utility that we have that works with the people the best and provide the best services. I will also go back to saying that are people here familiar with the application, the practice of restorative justice? And so if we talk about restorative justice, we also want to talk about restorative environmental justice and equity as well. So having that lens, which means that it's not based on power dynamics. So, and utility companies, if we stay with that application and lens that they are the power base and we keep giving them more power, then they will just take more power away from us. So the piece of that is that, and I have also been involved in an application and process where we have successfully had a institution, this was with the transit, but transportation is a human right as well, even though it's not legally recognized as a, or legislated, that we actually came in the city of St. Paul where they were going to go to our community and not make any stops for the people in the community. They were just going to bypass the people. And that was very power dynamics. And what was successful for us was we put our policy, our plan on the table. So when we only look at the one plan, which is the utilities plan, and we put all of our energies into their plans, trying to make it better for us, it will never get to the place where it actually works for us. So we need to come up with our own plans. Like the lady in Michigan is saying, they came up with another solution. We have to come up with our own solution and have two solutions to work off of. At least if we have two solutions, we come to a place that will also work for us. If we keep only working on that power dynamics of the people in power, we will get exactly what they offer us. Because that's what they're working from, a power base of capitalism. Capitalism was not intended for all of us. It was only intended from a place of white supremacy, white males, and people who had ownership of the land. And it was set up to retain that ownership and retain that power base. And again, I'm speaking very controversial, but we have to have a starting place where we start with our own plans, not keep working off of the plans of the establishment that was based on just making money off of the multiple.
That brings me to the framework of, like, we're talking in ways that we talk amongst ourselves when we're planning our advocacy efforts, not how we talk to the utility or the Public Service Commission or other power brokers. And many of our Energy Efficiency for All Coalition members are active in what we would call a blue city, but within a red state. That's the case here in St. Louis and Kansas City are democratically controlled cities, but in a republicly controlled state. And so within that framework, how do we frame our advocacy for a transition away from natural gas and fossil fuels to electric and renewable, cleaner forms of energy? Do any of you have something that you can share in how you frame your advocacy work? Because obviously you're not going to go in and tell the Ameren electric company that they need to become publicly held by the city or the county or the state, Yes, you have something to add to this? Yes, please.
By asking how, the policy landscape is changing, I speak to people and they say, yeah, the change. Where 5 years back, they would be like, what? So point is, how is it become somewhat easier to interact with utilities? When I say easier, or maybe, less challenging than before, 5 years back, 2 years back. So regardless of whether you're operating in a red state or a blue state, utilities are out there. They are profit-making entities. They will make money. That's fine by me personally. But my point is that it seems as if there's a lot going on in terms of the policy landscape. So how receptive are they to whatever language that you speak to them in?
Yeah, I would say the climate question with utilities is definitely changed in the last 5 years. There are major sustainability targets set by utilities now, like all the big Midwestern utilities and nationally too, 80% greenhouse gas reduction by 2045, things like this. In my opinion, those mean like next to nothing because a lot of it is accomplished by like purchasing of renewable credits and stuff like this, which doesn't really matter. But the point is, it is a PR value, a high PR priority for these major Fortune 500 companies to speak on and appear as if they are investing in. But I think it ultimately comes down to the economics, like of what's going on with coal. I don't think a new coal plant will be built in this country. Let's hope. I think natural gas power plants are the next thing that utilities will want to focus on, and that too needs to basically be wrapped up and done away with. And I think the way that that is accomplished is emergence of things like batteries. Like if you, basically what you need natural gas for is to match peak, to be able to ramp up and down, right? Rather than just base load the total amount of power you need to be able to match peak. And wind and solar can't do that very well. So you need gas. It's like a good pair to that. And utilities make a lot of money when they build power plants. So how do we disincentivize that? I mean, again, it's like we need to provide them a way to make money on stuff like batteries, on stuff like distributed solar, on stuff like being able to have your EV hooked up to the grid and the utility be able to call energy from your EV at like times of peak on the grid. Like all that whole distributed conversation, I think is like what needs to happen next. And utilities need to be able to make money off that. And that's my opinion on that. So.
Yeah, I would say, I agree with Andrew. I think just in Illinois and living in Chicago too, Illinois is a general blue state. Chicago is very blue. So utilities are very inclined to working with us. And we have that Climate and Equitable Jobs Act that just passed in 2021. So they have to, right? So in Illinois, it's definitely different. And I think it's an idealist way to look at things. But with Andrew was saying with other states, I think in the Midwest and across the country that are more red or more red cities, I think you have to really work with the utilities and develop these like partnerships and kind of like, get them to, just incentivize certain things too. And I know that's not the idealistic way of thinking, but I think that's really important in some of these other states is to work with some of these utilities to push them, even though they are making money, but yeah. And I wish we had more, these like big policies that get passed in states like Illinois, but in Minnesota, something just happened as well. I think the 100% renewable, what was it called? The 100% renewable act that just passed. Yeah. So I think these bigger policies help push for
I want to say, I work with utility companies. We work with the state reps. We have a initiative, that conversation that I hope will actually become some type of legislation where we're saying that the people in our communities, like we have graduated from using a battery operated drill, a battery operated saw. We want to elevate to now where we can have battery operated lawnmowers, battery operated snow blowers, solar generators, things that everyday people are using. So I do work with all those levels, but the most important people that we are not talking about that I keep hearing is the masses of the people. And the masses of the people, how do we educate them and make it real relevant for them? Because when we say policies, who makes the policies? The elected officials. Who are the elected officials accountable to? The people, the masses of the people, which is why they're trying to do voter restrictions and everything. Because if we educate the people to the level of relevancy as to why you need to go and make that mark and make sure that the policy people are making the policies that we're talking about are for you, relevant to your livability and quality of life. We had to start reaching back out to the masses of the people more. Those utility companies and being able to sit at a table on the utility board or a committee, that's really great. Or going up to the state, I want to go up to the state and talk to a state rep like the person we have right now, Representative Hussein, who is working on behalf of those things that are for the people. So again, let's do a cross level. Let's stop this up and down that we think it has to be an up and down thing. Let's start doing a parallel and make it more inclusive,
Yeah.
There are opportunities for anyone in the public to engage with their utilities when they're asking for a rate increase. They host public meetings, and Ameren here in St. Louis just had a public meeting 2 weeks ago. But I see the same faces most of the time.
Yeah.
So take the opportunity to go and talk to them and share your concerns about ever increasing rates.
It does have an effect too. And it's not so much it's not so much like the content of what you've said or like some eloquent moment that you convince somebody. It's more like numbers, like head count. How many people showed up to fall on this side of the issue? And that is tabulated and like taken into account by public service commissions, and
Yeah.
it makes a difference.
Yeah, it definitely makes a difference.
Yeah, and then I would add to that you need to keep people who are living in the experiences
Yeah.
at the table. So like we've been doing that. We have a low income energy waste reduction work group. It's a mouthful. That's the MPSC, our Public Service Commission. And our EFA Coalition was able to get that started or back started, I think 5 years ago. But something that we've been doing is like in different meeting spaces is having people there. And like what you said, Andrew, like we were able to get hundreds of people to show up and like fight against a rate increase, which we then won. But then at a recent meeting I was at, people were talking about how, okay, we fought this rate increase, but now the utility figured out a way, because natural gas fuel prices went up for them, like how to then charge them more to pay for it. So it's like, even though we won the rate increase, so having people who have lived experiences there advocating, influencing what like policy experts, everyone are like coming up with for advocacy and then talking is so critical. And I think that's the way you can like, what's going on, but you also empower different community folks to get involved and pay people to be there for their time and for their wealth of knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah, I did hear from other state staff, the Office of Public Counsel here in the state of Missouri is like the watchdog for all public utilities. And they did share that when Energy Efficiency for All Coalition members were showing up at meetings, that it was the first time that the voice of low-income communities were ever represented in the conversation. You had a question?
Yeah, no, I drag kids into these regulatory meetings all the time, so that's why it just rocks the room. Now, I wanted to add on a couple of comments that people have made here that I've loved. And I think it's important to remember that utilities in most states have a revenue requirement that is a percentage of like their expenditures, right?
Mhm.
So they're not necessarily making money off of selling power, but by having a big balance sheet.
Yes.
And that's really important because it means that they love to build infrastructure, but they don't necessarily want to sell you power. So I think that like knowing that and then thinking about these programs, which are absolutely essential because we have to help people where they are. We need BIPOC-led, low-income-led community programs today that will help keep these elderly people in Carbondale from turning their thermostats down. But at the same time, I think it's important to think about what we're doing in terms of a political shift. We are about to, under the IRA, and under so many of these programs, hand over billions of taxpayer dollars to investor-owned utilities. They are already getting money from us under LIHEAP and WAP. They're already getting money under all of the electrification initiatives that are so integral to our climate goals. So electrification is them taking money away from natural gas and petroleum. They are giving them huge amounts of political power going into the future. So that's what the fight for the soul of distributed energy to me is about. We have to also have stuff that pushes back on making these even bigger companies tomorrow than they are today with taxpayer investment, just to help low-income people that they should be obligated to help anyway.
Yeah.
So that's it. We're in a weird time, and I think it's important to think about where we're headed.
So WAP means Weatherization Assistance Program, and LIHEAP is Low Income Housing Energy Assistance Program.
Yeah.
We all operate with a lot of acronyms, trying to keep us all. Just to sort of, I guess, underpin the challenge that we're facing, I'd like to ask how many people here have had an energy audit for the home that they live in, with a show of hands? Not very many. Okay, how many people in this room have a heat induction stove?
Electric or?
It is electric, yes. These are some measures that are considered the most forward, energy efficient things that we can do. All right, so just a few of us. How many people have an air source heat pump? One, all right, good job. How many people have a solar photovoltaic array? Good for you, all right. How many have installed insulation in their attics? A few more hands, that's awesome. So I'm emphasizing this. If all of us in the room, obviously we're here because we're concerned about the environment, we're concerned about climate change, and yet just a tiny fraction of us have done these things. And if we could afford to come to this conference, we have money. And compared to those people that have far less money, how are we going to move them into a clean energy economy?
And efficiency is money. It's free money. So everyone should take it and give it to other people as well. It's free.
I wanted to talk on something relative to public policy and how we can make energy efficiency more relevant for everyone. And that is through benchmarking and energy disclosure or transparency, sometimes it's called. And I want to pose that to our panelists. Can you talk about things that can be accomplished through the city or state level regarding benchmarking or energy disclosure, and what you've been working on and how you're trying to advocate for these items?
Yeah, and are we okay on?
We've still got 4 minutes.
I can talk about energy disclosure and benchmarking and stuff. Oh, okay. That's what I thought, yeah.
Are we at time? We're at time. Okay, well, thank you all very much. There's lots more to still talk about. So hopefully in the breaks, we can continue our conversations. Thank you for participating and enjoy the rest of the conference.
I'm from the Good Climate Summit, just some reminders. The next round of workshops are going on at 11. And then just to be clear, recording of this whole thing will be posted to Huva. Huva, we just started using it. It's really useful for making connections, stuff like that. So I hope you have a good day, and then I will hopefully see you in the whatever. Give me another round of applause. Yeah, it'll be up there too. Well, I hope that.